The 60s were dead and gone. The 70s came charging on. New acts and new trends, farewell to old friends as the hits in the top 10, they shone. Newsflash people, it is March 27, 1970 and the top 10 is absolutely stacked. There's a million stories way down inside the chart. Let's get down to it. King of proceedings this week is the segment which told him not to carry an octopus under his hat. Hello and goodbye! Leaving the top 10 this week are a couple of little heralded hits. Neil Sedaka with Wheeling, West Virginia, which spent 3 weeks in for a top of 9, and Superstar by Murray Head from the then hot Jesus Christ Superstar stage musical, which did little with 5 weeks in the 10 for a top of 5. Replacing them are two equally unimpressive performers, both being with a similar fruity flavour, that fruit being apple. Isaiah Tema Harbour by Mary Hopkin, produced by future Rack Records Svengali Mickey Most, He of Herman's Hermit, The Animals, Donovan and Jeff Beck, which bobbled about for 3 weeks, getting no higher than number 7. And then there was Badfinger with Come and Get It, their first hit that also spent 3 weeks in the 10, but at least this one spent 1 week in the top 5. Biggest hit leaving the chart this week was Think About Tomorrow Today by what was then Australia's biggest rock band, The Masters Apprentices, which had been around 15 weeks and made all of number 7. Biggest hit joining the merry band of top 40sters was a great favourite of mine, Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum, bound for 6 weeks at the top and to become the biggest hit of the year. And for the next number 1, it's back to completely mental songs, GB Policeman Misheard Obligated by lovably campy Engelbert. No doubt so named to differentiate him from creepily campy Engelbert, I should think, but nonetheless, answers at the end if you haven't figured it out before. Number 10 this week is a Stone classic.
Stone classic!
Shocking Blue with Venus, a record I refuse to believe did not make number 1. This is the point now where I was beginning to really gather a little cadre of my favourite songs on the radio, where I knew what I liked, and I liked Venus. Couldn't understand a word they were singing, so I made up my own words. This song topped at number 3, where it spent 3 weeks for an above average 17 weeks on the chart. The B-side, Hot Sand, is pretty great too. Bonus trivia, Nirvana's first single was a cover of a Shocking Blue song, Love Buzz. In at 9 this week, it's Aussie Gold with Lionel Rose, Australian national treasure, and his 3-week number 1, I Thank You. Rose was the hero of the nation and reigning Australian of the Year, as well as being undisputed world bantamweight champ after he beat the overwhelming favourite fighting Harada in a 15-round decision. He had 2 hits, this and Please Remember Me, both written and produced by Johnny Young. After his singing and punching people career was over, Rose became a successful businessman and was much mourned when he passed away in 2011. 8 is Mary Hopkin with Tema Harbour, her first single after she got away from Paul McCartney's overbearing presence in her career and handled it to an equally domineering personality in Mickey Most. Tema Harbour is, for me, a bit of a mess sonically. Hopkin has an undeniably pretty voice, but there's just too much fiddly-diddliness behind her here. But Mickey Most went on to Susie Quattro in the original I Love Rock and Roll, so who am I to judge? 3 weeks in, it went nowhere, showed us nothing. Hopkin did have 3 more hits this year and would have had a number 1 with her version of Knock Knock Who's There, were it not for the radio band, and by the end of the year she pulled back from recording work to work as a backing vocalist on sessions conducted by her husband, super producer Tony Visconti. At 7 we have Badfinger, one of the best bands to be totally screwed over by the industry, with their Paul McCartney cast-off Come and Get It, which, while we're at it, surely it wasn't good enough for a spot on Abbey Road, but is it really that much worse than Oh Darling or Maxwell Silver Hammer? Badfinger were pivotal in the development of the 1970s power pop, and they're still a band we hear echoes of today in a lot of guitar bands. But they fell afoul of terrible management. Their manager Stan Polly was a downright crook, and at Apple they had to wrangle with the diabolical Alan Klein, that bankrupted them and drove 2 of them to terrible ends. The real upside of Come and Get It is the B-side, Rock of All Ages, which again sounds Beatlesque, but 1964 young keen Beatles, not 1969 tired old drugged up Beatles. It's a real rock and raver. Number 6, we see the problematic Rolf Harris. Harris was a ubiquitous presence to Australian kids my age back in 1970. He was all over the ABC, painting things and wobbling his wobbleboard and consorting with actors in dodgy-looking koala bear costumes. Two Little Boys was the last number 1 in the UK in the 1960s and the first of the 1970s. But it was bunk then and hasn't improved any with age. In fact, with Harris's spectacular fall from grace, it doesn't seem like a piece of art worth rescuing by separating from the artist. At 5 is one of the final sightings in the wild of the actual Beatles themselves, with their well-loved hit Let It Be, up from 10 last week and seemingly destined for the top. Or is it? Released well in advance of its eponymous album, Alan Klein had taken to pretty much bypassing Capitol Records' release schedules, and the Let It Be album was still mired in post-production hell. It came roaring out of the gates, debuting at 23, then 10, now 5, but it was never able to make number 1, being blocked from the top by the Stalingrad-like defences of Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. And with their next single, The Long and Winding Road, stiffing as well, this meant the Beatles signed off their career as number 1 hitmakers with the rather underwhelming Ballad of John and Yoko in July 1969. 3 weeks at number 2, this was still in the top 10 but falling when it looks like it got swept up in the radio ban. Now we turn our attention to the records that flirted with greatness but were weighed and found wanting. 2 records this week that maybe should have made the top 10 but didn't. First up, Elvis Presley from his Change of Habit movie with the hot and rockin' Rubberneckin', which was drifting around the charts for a few months, but we couldn't send it any higher than number 19. Pity, because old E had bought the late 60s hot gospel sound he was going on at the time, and he deserved to be encouraged for at least making an effort. Its biggest problem, I think, was that like a lot of Elvis movie songs, it was cut ridiculously short, and this didn't leave enough time for its potent jam-like qualities to coalesce. The other one this week that became a very famous song indeed, Na Na Hey Hey Kiss Him Goodbye, by literal one-hit wonders studio band Steam. Did a lot better in Brisbane than the rest of the country, but a lot better wasn't good enough and it ground to a halt at 16. It got a second life in 1977 when the Chicago White Sox started to use it at games to taunt opponents, and that's become pretty much its universal application since then. In at 4 we have a silly little sign of the times in Melting Pot by Blue Mink, a useless bit of folderol which got to number 3 despite contradicting the laws of physics, chemistry and evolutionary biology, and bringing images of horrible, slow and painful death as they recklessly chucked all their unfortunate specimens into a gigantic pot and melted them. Is that really what they wanted? And the song would never be played on the radio today, not without a bleep or two. Blue Mink is a very interesting band nonetheless, a supergroup even. Barry Morgan, who was Elton John amongst many other people, session drummer. Ray Cooper, that guy who no one is even sure what he actually does, but he turns up on everybody's records anyway, and super bassist Herbie Flowers with the rhythm section. They also had cult guitarist Alan Parker and Dusty Springfield's gal pal Maddie Bell on vocals, as well as the ubiquitous two Rogers, Cook and Greenaway. Blue Mink managed 3 hits here in Australia, even if it was hard to tell Blue Mink from Shocking Blue from Frigid Pink for a while there. A ways back there, we saw Let It Be by the Beatles. It's fair to say that the Moptopulous ones weren't having the best time of it in March 1970, and by April it was a catastrophe. Paul McCartney released his first solo album and announced he'd left the band, hamstringing the upcoming release of Let It Be, now scheduled for a month after. I wonder how Paul got on against his erstwhile employers. It's time for our latest segment. There's gonna be a showdown. Macca's self-titled album came out on April 17, 1970. Let It Be popped out 3 weeks later on May the 8th. On the US charts, McCartney hit the number 1 spot on May 23rd for 3 weeks, bumping Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young off the top after a mere week. Paul's run at the top was ended when Let It Be itself dispatched him, hanging in for 4 weeks before the Woodstock soundtrack finally did for it. While it's fair to say neither album pulled up any trees critically, McCartney sold a respectable 2 times gold, or about 1 million copies, while Let It Be was a more reliable catalogue album, having sold about 4 million units so far. By way of comparison, the long-forgotten compilation album Hey Jude outsold both of these records in 1970. McCartney did very well, staying on the Billboard charts for 47 weeks, while Let It Be hung in for 55. But by way of comparison, Revolver spent 85, Sgt. Pepper's 175, the White Album 215, Abbey Road 400 and counting. McCartney's album has generated about 250.5 million streams. Let It Be, however, has pumped out 1.5 billion streams. The song Let It Be alone has more than 3 times as many streams as McCartney's whole album put together. No big award nominations, but then the Grammys always snub the Beatles, and each album did well in other major charts. Macca got to number 1 in Canada and number 2 in Australia, but Let It Be was number 1 in the US and 6 other major international markets, including Australia. Gotta give this one to the Beatles. It took Macca a long time to come up with anything even consistently approaching the best work in his old band. Well, at 3, it's a breath of fresh air, a ray of sunshine in Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. Not only my favourite song on the chart this week, but I think one of my favourite songs of all time. It's the song that kept Let It Be off the top of the chart, spending 4 weeks on top, and it was still at number 3 when the radio band swept it up, which would mean that in the pre-streaming era, it would have to be the biggest drop off the charts ever, I think. The number 2 record that week was Travel and Band by Creedence, which fell only to number 5 the next week. At number 2 is the only American record on the chart this week, All I Have to Do Is Dream by Glenn Campbell and Bobby Gentry. It's a lovely song, but it's very routine countrypolitan from two artists who've both done much better separately, and here don't really offer anything extra to one another. It was quite a big hit. It spent a week at number 1, and is one of only 2 songs to have spent 10 weeks in the top 10 on this chart. Love Grows was the other. Time for Facty Facts. Antarctica is bigger than Europe. 14 countries have the moon on their flag, but only one country has its flag on the moon. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen is the only song to have been number 1 in the UK in 4 different years: 1974, 1975, 1991 and 1992. Wow! I now no longer know what is real and what isn't, but here's something that will bring us back to reality. It's Val's Fantastic World of Fun. Biggest riser on the chart this week is another Dutch band, the T-Set, with Ma Belle Amie, up from 27 to 13. And the biggest faller is Tommy Rowe with Jam Up and Jelly Tight, down from 12 to 36. Highest debutante is my old favourite Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum, in at 30 and destined for 6 weeks on top. Count 'em. And the longest running hit on the charts at 17 weeks was Johnny Farnham's one-time number 1, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. In both the US and the UK, the same song dominates the charts, Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel, in the US for 6 weeks and in the UK for 3. It made number 2 here, Its Path Blocked by Spirit in the Sky. This time last year, it was one of the first bubblegum hits topping the chart, with the 1910 Fruit Gum Company's nowadays politically incorrect song Indian Giver. And next year, Creedence would hold sway with Have You Ever Seen the Rain? And the massivest album in town this week was the bone-crushing Led Zeppelin 2, which held on for 5 weeks between Abbey Road and Bridge Over Troubled Water. What a year for albums! What a year for albums indeed, and what a year for debut albums. Here are 12 of the best, the most popular or the most interesting debut studio albums for the year.
Varje kväll när allt är tyst och barnen sent omsider sover.
There's no more baby, baby all night long.
Cold, callous feet trotting up and down synthetic avenues, streets and gardens. Gardens that grow shit. Whoa, ha, ha. Whoa, ha, hey. Whoa, ha, ha.
We gotta get you a woman. It's like nothing else can make you sure you're alive.
Just move on up toward your destination. Though you may find
I hope that brought back some great memories of top albums or piques your curiosity as to some overlooked classics. Next up, drumming us into the number 1 hit this week, it's the funky monk with the thunderous badunkadunk, Monty the Safety Monkey. One hit in town is Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin at the end of 4 massive weeks on top. They may have poo-pooed releasing singles in their own homeland, but they used to dash them off here, and this and Black Dog both made the top 10. This one hung in on the chart for 17 weeks, and it dodged the radio ban because despite being an English group, they were on an American label in Atlantic. One of the great pillars of hard rock, this is a song that surely even the most casual fan of classic rock would know, and a deserving number 1. Well folks, that is how the cow ate the cabbage this hot summer week in 1970. I was a neophyte radio fan, and songs like Love Grows, Venus and Spirit in the Sky are some of the earliest songs I can remember as being my favourites above other songs. That's where I was in 1970. Where were you in 1970? Who were you in 1970? Were you even in 1970? Join us next time when, should the good Lord be a willing and the creeks don't rise, we'll be back with a fresh instalment next week. Ish.